Imagine looking at a high-resolution, stark white computer motherboard resting on a cold marble floor. The lighting is clinical, right? The hard edges are perfect, permanent, completely fixed. Well, for about 400 years, that is exactly how we pictured the human brain. Just this rigid, hardwired machine. But now, imagine watching that cold metal motherboard begin to blur. It softens, and suddenly it dissolves completely into the texture of a soft woven living fabric. That right there is what we're looking at today. We are watching the 400-year-old myth of the fixed brain completely dissolve.
You see, for centuries, mainstream science and medicine operated under this deeply depressing worldview. It was known as neurological nihilism. The absolute brightest minds truly believed that our mental circuits were permanently hardwired. The dogma basically said if your brain was damaged or if you were born with a limitation, well, you were stuck with it for life. The brain could only decline, it could never be healed or fundamentally changed. Kind of bleak, isn't it?
So let's dive into this explainer and ground ourselves in the actual source material. We're looking at The Brain That Changes Itself by Dr. Norman Doidge. This is just an absolutely revolutionary text. It documents the renegade scientists who finally prove that our brains actually change their own structure and function based on our thoughts, activities, and experiences. We're going to explore how the mind literally rewires the brain.
Let's quickly contrast the old worldview with the new one. On one side, we have localizationism. This was that rigid, machine-like view that every single mental function had one strict, genetically hardwired location in the brain. Period. But then, on the flip side, we have the profound discovery of neuroplasticity. Neuro obviously standing for neuron, and plastic meaning changeable or malleable. The hard, strict edges of localizationism soften here into something that's alive, adaptable, and capable of just breathtaking reorganization. All right, moving into our first section, the sound of light and the concept of sensory substitution.
I want to introduce you to Cheryl Schiltz. Because of a toxic reaction to an antibiotic, Cheryl's vestibular balance system, the inner ear machinery that keeps us all upright, was completely destroyed. She became part of a group of patients known as wobblers. She felt like she was perpetually falling into a bottomless abyss, literally 24 hours a day. She couldn't even stand without support. By conventional medical standards, her case was 100% hopeless. But then she met Paul Bach-y-Rita, a pioneer in brain plasticity, and he just completely rejected the idea that her brain couldn't adapt. So he had Cheryl wear a literal construction hat equipped with an accelerometer, which was connected to this thin plastic strip that just rested on her tongue. As she tilted her head, the device sent electric signals, which she said felt like tiny champagne bubbles, right onto her tongue. He was practicing sensory substitution. He was using the tongue as a brand new data port to deliver balanced signals to the brain, completely bypassing her destroyed inner ear.
Now, what's truly mind-blowing here is the residual effect. The very first time Cheryl put the hat on, that agonizing feeling of falling stopped immediately. But the real miracle happened when she took it off. After just 1 minute on the device, she kept her perfect balance for 20 seconds. After 20 minutes on the device, she had a full hour of perfect balance. Her plastic brain was actively using those signals to unmask secondary hidden neural pathways, and over the next year, she used this device to train her brain, eventually completely restoring her balance without using the machine at all. And the crazy thing is, this wasn't even Bach-y-Rita's first miracle. Back in 1969, he created a tactile vision device. Blind patients sat in a chair with 400 vibrating stimulators on their backs, which were connected to a camera. The camera translated images into vibrations, and these blind subjects actually learned to perceive three-dimensional space. They could recognize faces and objects just from the vibrations on their back. As Bach-y-Rita famously said, "We see with our brains, not with our eyes." The skin, the eyes, the ears, they're really just data ports. Your brain can learn to decode the universal electrical language of the mind from anywhere.
Which brings us to Section 2, Imagination and the Brain, and how this microscopic rewiring actually happens.
So how is this miraculously happening down at the cellular level? Well, if you remember one single mechanism from this entire explainer, let it be this golden rule of neuroscience. Neurons that fire together, wire together. This concept was actually first proposed by Sigmund Freud back in the 1880s and later championed by Donald Hebb. It basically explains that when two neurons fire simultaneously, chemical changes occur that actually strengthen their physical connection. When you learn something, your individual neurons actually alter their anatomical shape to link up. Your lived experience physically changes your brain.
But here's the catch. Brain map space is highly valuable. Which brings us to competitive plasticity. There is this continuous, endless war of nerves going on inside your head for cortical real estate, and it's strictly governed by the rule of use it or lose it. Think about why it's so incredibly difficult to learn a new language as an adult. It's not just because your brain is quote-unquote old, it's because your native language has already claimed, mapped out, and utterly dominated your linguistic brain map. To learn Spanish, you have to actively fight for real estate that English already owns.
Now, we know that physical practice rewires the brain, but consider this provocative question. Can mere thought build physical muscle? I mean, it sounds like complete science fiction, right? But neuroscientist Álvaro Pascual León designed this groundbreaking experiment involving a piano, physical measurements, and pure imagination to find out.
Here's what he did. Pascual León took two groups of people who had never played the piano. One group physically practiced the sequence of notes for 2 hours a day for 5 days straight. The other group sat in front of the piano for the exact same amount of time, but they only imagined playing the sequence. They never touched the keys. At the end of the study, the physical group increased their finger muscle strength by 30%. But incredibly, the group that simply imagined playing increased their muscle strength by 22%. The motor programs in their brains fired and strengthened simply through visualization. Immaterial thoughts leave very real material traces.
Let's shift gears to Section 3, the plastic paradox, because neuroplasticity is absolutely a double-edged sword.
We really need to pause here and look at this carefully, because there is a serious catch to all of this immense power. There's a dark side to this science. The exact same plastic mechanism that allows a stroke victim to heal or a blind person to see is also responsible for our most stubborn neuroses, anxieties, and compulsions. Because neurons that fire together wire together, our bad habits become neurologically locked in. We can become these rigid caricatures of ourselves simply because our brains are so incredibly efficient at sustaining repeated behaviors.
Pascual León uses this brilliant metaphor of a snowy hill to explain this. Imagine your brain as a vast, perfectly smooth white field of snow. That soft snow represents your genetics. The first time you take a sled down the hill, that's your initial habit formation. You can steer pretty much anywhere you want. But if you take that exact same path down the hill a second, third, and fourth time, you start to carve deep tracks into the snow. And very quickly, those tracks become incredibly rigid, efficient routines that are almost impossible to steer your sled out of.
So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that unlearning is actually harder than learning. Breaking a bad habit isn't just about trying to put new information into an empty container. It's an active, physical battle. You have to override an old, deeply etched neural map that already has a massive competitive advantage in your brain. You literally have to force the sled out of those deep tracks and carve an entirely new path through the snow.
And that brings us to our final section, the eternal sprout. This is about lifelong growth.
Picture a pristine white porcelain bust sitting in a sun-drenched room. Now imagine a single, delicate green sprout emerging from a tiny crack in that porcelain. For a long time, we used to think that after a certain age, your brain just slowly died off, like cracking porcelain. But the science shows that plasticity exists from the cradle all the way to the grave. We now know about lifelong neurogenesis. That is the birth of entirely new neurons, even in the aging brain. Our mental exercises actually dive down into the cell nucleus and turn specific genes on and off. The brain isn't just some inanimate vessel that slowly empties out over time. It is a living, breathing ecosystem with a massive appetite.
Way back in 1894, the great neuroanatomist Santiago Ramón y Cajal actually predicted all of this when he stated this incredible, empowering truth. The brain is perfectible by well-directed mental exercise. Every single time you learn a new skill, read a book, or even vividly imagine a complex movement, you are actively, physically altering the microscopic architecture of your own mind. You are the architect of your own anatomy.
Think about this. Your brain is literally rewriting itself right now just by processing the words I'm speaking. You are not a fixed machine. You are a natural-born shapeshifter, completely capable of extraordinary adaptation. So, knowing that every single thought leaves a physical trace, what tracks are you going to carve tomorrow?